Here in Shigaraki are many potteries, and each slanted roof in the town covers a Japanese climbing kiln. The creation of beauty has permeated all aspects of life in Japan. Not only works of sculpture and painting, but also objects for everyday use are appreciated as art. The strongest individual potter in Shigaraki is Mr. Rakusai, who is highly regarded for his vigorous ware produced by the traditional method of coiling and throwing. After he has flattened the ball of clay on a wooden bat, he rolls the coil in the air and pinches it onto the base. When all the coils have been laid up, Mr. Rakusai skillfully shapes the clay into the lower half of a large planter. Because the finished pot will be rather large, it is made in 2 stages. After the first portion is completed, it is removed from the wheel and carried outside to stiffen. When it has become stiff enough to support the addition of new coils, it is brought back to the wheel and recentered. Then Mr. Rakusai inserts a weight to keep the pot in place. The work of the second stage includes adding coils, knitting them together, and pulling up the sides into a large, handsome planter. This coiling and throwing method is widely used throughout Japan for several practical reasons. One is that there is virtually no limit to the size of the pot that can be made. Another is that the coiling and throwing method requires less strength than trying to wrestle a large pot from one big lump of clay. The clay used in this planter weighs about 30 pounds. Mr. Rakusai uses native Shigaraki clay, which contains chunks of feldspar that begin to melt out in the firing and become white spottings, as the surface of this water container shows. No glaze has been applied. To finish his pieces, the powder depends on the accumulation of wood ash, which makes a natural glaze, typical of good Shigaraki ware. The water container, this flower vase, these boxes for powdered tea, and the tea bowl are all for use in the Japanese tea ceremony, Cha no Yu. In Shigaraki, the kilns of the various potters are stoked by professional firemen who must know exactly how to judge the heat and its effects on the clay. In this climbing kiln of 11 chambers, the fireman first stokes the bottom chamber until it reaches the proper temperature, about 2400 degrees Fahrenheit. Then each consecutive chamber is brought up to temperature, and firing the entire kiln takes about 5 days. Another type of pottery that has a rugged, natural finish, and that takes its name from the region where it is made, is Bizen ware. Linear patterns such as these are one of the identifying features of Bizen ware. These lines are created by stacking the pots in the kiln with pieces of rice straw soaked in brine, which when burned leave trails similar to calligraphy. These Bizen pieces are the work of Mr. Kaneshige, a potter who has been named a national treasure, a title bestowed by the Japanese government on outstanding artists. Mr. Kaneshige makes pottery especially for the tea ceremony and for the tea house. Here, with the help of an assistant, he is making a large bowl. As Mr. Kaneshige works, his assistant must adjust the speed of the wheel to his needs. This vertical shape will become a traditional flower vase to be used in the tea house. The shapes of Bizen ware, and particularly Shigaraki pottery, are rugged and strong, full of character, not refined. When it is completed, the vase will be left unglazed. Both Shigaraki ware and Bizen ware rely on the accumulation of melting wood ash to produce a natural glaze. In a pottery making region such as Bizen, techniques are handed down from father to son. Here Mr. Kaneshige's son, Mitsuaki, is preparing the clay by wedging or kneading in the traditional manner, which produces a flower-like pattern. The custom in Japan is that the son follows time-honored practices of his father and ancestors. However, in this case, Mitsuaki is giving a traditional form a slightly individualistic variation. Japanese people who highly value pieces of pottery have special wooden boxes made for them. Each container is designed specifically to fit the individual pot. An owner would keep the pot boxed and carefully tied with an attractive ribbon, removing it only to show to special visitors. These pots are excellent examples of Mishima decoration, an old Korean technique that can be identified by patterns of inlaid white clay. In the town of Mashiko is the new studio of the famous potter Mr. Shimaoka. He makes matching teacups by throwing them off the top of a lump of clay. A special advantage of using this technique is that he does not continually have to center little lumps of clay. Japanese potters have a special regard for the interior of a pot. Mr. Shimaoka shapes the piece from within by means of a long-handled wooden tool called a rib. Working in this way, he lets the outside surface follow the inner contours. When finished, the cup is cut loose with a string and placed beside the ones previously thrown. With the remaining clay, he makes a large vase, again working both with his hands and with a long-handled rib. Careful attention is given to the finishing of a strong rim, and a piece of wet leather is used for this purpose. To lift the vase from the wheel, Mr. Shimaoka uses pieces of split bamboo so that he need not handle the work excessively and possibly mar the surface. Many tools, such as scrapers, stamps, and paddles, are employed in developing Mishima decorations. Here Mr. Shimaoka rolls braided string over a pot to create a pattern. Next, he brushes on a white clay slip. The final step involves scraping slip off the projecting portions. Thus, he prepares a Mishima decoration. After such applications, pots are carried outside to dry before being taken to the kiln. Another outstanding potter is Mr. Kato Takuo, who lives in the city of Tajimi, and who is known for using traditional glazes on original forms. This famous traditional Japanese glaze is called oil spot tomoku. It is black with brown spottings. Mr. Kato is working with porcelain clay. Because its smooth, buttery consistency makes throwing a large pot difficult, he utilizes the very practical technique of throwing two identical cylinders. After carefully checking the dimensions, he places the first section atop the second. Now, working with the enlarged cylinder, he throws a large, deep bowl. Many Japanese potters prefer that the finished work not have a mechanical roundness. Therefore, Mr. Kato welcomes the fact that the pot is off-center and makes no attempt to achieve perfect centering, which he would regard as being rather sterile. A surface decoration is created by cutting into the clay diagonally and pressing out from the inside. Glazing of bisque-fired ware is accomplished by dipping. Once the teacups and the flower vase have been coated, they will be placed in the kiln. There, the brown glaze will turn white in the firing. The finished glaze, called Shino, has many small pittings that reveal the orange cast of the clay. The most famous tea ceremony ware is Raku. This is a black Raku tea bowl. For centuries, tea masters have preferred this unpretentious ware. This red Raku tea bowl is held in the traditional fashion. In Kyoto, at the Raku factory, ware is fired at low temperatures and for a brief time, just long enough to melt the glaze. The pieces are placed in a round, barrel-like kiln which has no stack, the smoke coming right out into the room. Members of the same family of potters have been making Raku tea ware for over 400 years. This man is the 14th generation. When he sees that the glaze is sufficiently melted, he removes the covering pieces and snatches out the pottery. Here, little dishes for serving cakes, and places them on fire brick to cool. From time to time, he quenches the tongs in water to keep them from sticking to the hot glaze. While the kiln is open, it loses heat rapidly. Therefore, it is reloaded immediately and covered. Within 20 minutes, the heat builds up again and melts the glaze. Each firing cycle, loading, heating, and unloading, takes about 30 minutes. With continuous firing, 16 loads can be completed in one day. Thus, the visits to Mr. Rakusai, Mr. Kaneshige, Mr. Shimaoka, Mr. Kato, and the Raku factory help one to appreciate traditional methods of making Japanese pottery.